everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition, a comics loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with comics creator Moti Friedman. Moti, thank you for jumping in, joining, and talking with me.
Really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, pleasure to have you. And folks out there will know you for work on Black Alpha, Ancient Diary of Mars, Upside Down World, as well as a range of other titles. So glad to have you on today. And I suppose by means of a first question, I'm curious about what inspires you about this world of comics.
Well, I've read comics forever. It started when I was a kid in Israel, really little kid, and I drew since I remember myself. But there used to be Popeye comics we used to have, and Tex, if you remember those.
Mhm.
Um, and then when I came to the States, I was 10 and fell in love with American comic books, with the superhero. I have an interesting theory about superhero comics, why they became the standard. Would love to share that with you if you let me.
Yeah,
But
please do.
I always drew and I always told stories. So I think it's a wonderful world, and I love the cooperating with people,
Mhm.
creating it together. Now, I can do a comic book, for example, or a book for that matter, from by myself from start to finish. Um, I can write, okay. I can draw, not as well as I can write, but I can draw.
Mhm.
Um, and I can letter too because Dan Berger used to be. I worked with him. He was the managing director of heavy metal, and he worked on Ninja Turtles and stuff like that. He taught
Mhm.
me his pet peeve is how to do lettering, and he taught me how to do lettering. And he's I'm not on his level obviously, but I can letter, and I see lettering as part of the art. Are you familiar with the term shadow pages?
I'm not. Please tell me about that.
So, in the old days, the way they used to make comic, whether it's full script or Marvel style, is basically it was a production line, right?
Mhm.
Somebody would write, somebody would draw pencil, maybe ink as well, or use somebody with ink. And then at the end, somebody would letter and the editor would say where to put the lettering.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
you had several people working on a comic book.
Mhm.
But the way I can do comics, if I do it myself, I can put pages with a simple sketch or with nothing, just with the boxes and everything before drawing. Now, the advantage of doing that is if you do the word balloons before you start to draw, I don't have to draw under them. Now, today with AI and with other software, you can create comics much faster. You may not have a hard copy like you did physical stuff, but I think it's very comfortable to, I can see the whole story, and I always try to see the whole story before I jump inside.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's the old George R. R. Martin always talks about the architect and the gardener.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
we're all in between. I would say I'm more towards the architect, but I still like to, he says the gardener, an architect plans out everything. I love to know the ending before I start the story. Like the Ancient Diary of Mars, which is it's an illustrated book.
Mhm.
Uh, when I came to Harry, the publisher at Marcosia, it's a UK publisher of prose and graphic novels, stuff like that. I told him the whole story. You shouldn't surprise. One thing, if somebody's listening to this, young creators or aspiring creators, don't surprise your editors. They want to know what the ending is. And what he loved my ending, and he agreed, to do the thing, and that's the ending I did. So I like to do, but a gardener, it's not like everything is a surprise. If as George says, if he plants a tomato tree, he'll be surprised if an orange tree jumps out or other kind of plant. But
Mhm.
they flow. So I think it's a mixture. We're all a mixture of both. Not very few are. If you take everything like 100% and you control everything 100%, then you don't leave yourself spontaneity afterwards. But if you're not planning, you may write yourself into a corner, and then the machine, the God in the machine in the old ancient Greek, the God would come and make everything okay. It's a horrible story. It was a very bad story. So to me, I, comics is a medium, and it's
Mhm.
unique. It's similar. It has some similarity to cinema, and I use some of the cinematic methodologies like motion left to right and all kind of stuff like that. But it's a unique thing that it's a combination of words and picture. And I think it's a beautiful thing because for several reasons. When I do it by myself, you know, I don't have to overwrite. Like if I draw Superman, for example, and then I write in a box, and let's say he's flying, and I write Superman is flying, the words didn't contribute anything to the story.
Hmm.
But if I write something like he was never so worried in his whole life, and then you say him flying, it changes the whole mood, and it's giving us information. The words, so he's flying, but it's also something's happening.
Hmm. Hmm. He's headed somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, something's happening, or he was never so happy his whole life. That changes the whole thing. And it's the same picture of the same guy flying Superman,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And light is not heavy as a god. That's his name. Kal-El means in Hebrew, light as a god, light god. Light is not heavy, not as no, not darkness and light. Kal-El, El mean, Nathaniel. The word Nathaniel God gave, right?
Hmm.
Nathan El, and same thing. Kal-El, interesting name. But so that's one aspect of it when I create by myself. But what I love is to create with people.
Yeah. Yeah. What have been some of
But
those best collaborations for you?
you learn so much from that, and you have such a time. If you're willing to park your ego, and it doesn't matter who did the idea or who did the what. Like I can draw some. I've worked with collaborators in several ways, and it's fun. For example, there's an anthology I'm working on, and I work with several friends. So some of the things I drew and wrote and lettered and did everything by myself.
Hmm.
But others I did with friends, and we worked in several methodologies, and they're all equally as fun for me. For example, it could be Marvel style. Stanley invented that
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
but it has advantages and disadvantages. But basically, the idea of the Marvel style is this: I give you as the writer, I give you, let's say, the artist, a general plot. It used to be very short when you did it with Jack Kirby, but plots could be 10, 15 pages if you're doing a 20-something page book instead of a
Hmm.
full script. And you draw something, and then when I get the drawings, now I'm trying like a word puzzle to fit the words to the drawings.
Right.
So
Right.
it's an interesting exercise. Full script is you write, okay, there's 5 panels on the page. Panel one, establishing shot. Superman is flying above the city. Spider-Man is jumping from building to building, whatever the case may be. You tell them exactly what you want, and you say this is an up shot, this is a down shot, bird's eye view, worm's eye view, close up, whatever. The writer basically is also the director.
Hmm.
In the
Hmm.
Marvel, in the method, the artist is the director, so it's an interesting collaboration. Now, when I worked with Terrence, for example, we did a 4 pages short story. I always ask artists that I work with, being an artist myself, what do you like to draw?
Hmm.
It's a question, but not everybody likes to draw everything. And we all hate to draw background, but some people love it. That's their thing. George Perez, God rest his soul, was one of the most amazing in team books, and nobody wants to do team books. It's so much work, and he could get all the costumes and the silhouettes different and make it work. Amazingly detailed artist.
Hmm.
So every artist has got his own, kind of approach. So the first thing I ask them, what do you like to draw? And then I write a story that they like to draw. Now, with Terrence, I gave them this general thing. I explain what I want page, generally in the 4 pages and what the ending will be. And then he drew everything. And then I put in the words to fit. Now, I have other artists that tell me, look, we know how to draw really well. We don't know how to pace a story. So when I worked with Black Alpha, one of the things I learned from Tom Ross, who's an amazing artist and creator of comic books, is how to pace a story. It can be all action or all calm. It has to be ups and downs, and you have to let some things breathe. And you could
Hmm.
see that some in the old comic books that everything's slow until the last 2 pages. Everything's got to go fast because they're wrapping up the story. They didn't plan ahead. That's why I think the architect works better, in
Oh.
my view. But so you write us, you write. So I had some artists that do layouts. So I would do rough layouts for them, with the lettering and everything, and they would draw on top of it in their own style and make it their own. Like a young artist named Norton. Once upon a time in San Francisco, I brought him on board to Michael's Once Upon a Time in San Francisco. That I send you those covers, and
Hmm.
it's amazing work. But I've done work with him that I just did a Marvel style, and he drew everything. So some artists just say, "So no, just give me full script, and I'll do everything." It depends. But I think the lettering is an integral part of the design. So I like to have control of it when I'm drawing, and
Hmm.
I don't need to plan ahead because young artists, one of the mistakes they draw, they don't leave space for lettering. And then you have, somebody works on this huge. I've seen even Greg Capullo once show that he created this whole background of Joker fighting Batman, but somebody put lettering on it.
Yeah.
The shadows, he had them fight in the shadows or something, but you can't see because there was no place. So everybody, sometimes it's an advantage, I think, to doing lettering beforehand.
Hmm. Hmm.
So to me, I think, and then when you work with people, they always surprise you. Like, you know, um, they do stuff in ways that you didn't, you give them something and sometimes they get back to you in a way that you're surprised. And I mean, really good surprises. Wow, I would never thought to do it like that because as much as creative as one person can be, you're always limited. And I used to play basketball. Wasn't very good at it. Sat at the bench, but I like team sports, not tennis. And and a team really can have this amazing synergy that the sum of the parts is greater. The whole is greater than the part. Everyone together can really create something amazing.
Hmm. Hmm. Well said. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. Oh, by the way, one of the things, people say, don't meet your heroes.
Hmm.
Um, it's usually not true in comic books. I know there's some not nice people in comics books. I met a few of them, but they're like 1 in 100.
Yeah.
If you're going to the industry, it's a small industry, guys. I'm not a powerhouse in this industry by any stretch of the imagination, but I met some powerhouses, and they've always been extremely kind with their time, with feedback. Take a guy like Bob McLeod.
Hmm.
I call
Hmm.
him Sensei. He's my mentor. I got some feedback from him on a few pages. By the way, he's got, in my view, one of the best books on making comics ever.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
book that he did, amazing book with just examples and example. That's my Bible. Um, anyway, Bob always gave me feedback, and he would correct my stuff and tell him, Bob, I'm not paying you for this. Yeah, that's okay. And he would send me corrections of my drawing, explaining to me, here made this mistake here. It took me to Jay-Z Jones. I had some problem with colors. He said, look, this is what I do. Here's the complementary colors. He gave me an example of how he uses. He saw that I did a drawing with the Hulk. He said, yeah, it's very three-dimensional, very good, but you're not taking into consideration this, this, and this. There's complementary colors, red and green. He gave me feedback, showed me how he did it in the drawing. Took my you can look at my color skill before Jay-Z Jones and after, and he's
Hmm.
an amazing artist. I'm not in his league. Bob Layton, I said this in another podcast. I drew Iron Man. He with Terry Austin has always been one of my favorite inkers slash finisher. Bob is an amazing finisher, an artist in his own right, and writer and manager. He did everything in comics, even the business part. But also he sends me feedback. He says, "Here, you should do this with the inking and this." I didn't ask for it. I didn't pay him for it. And people are really kind. Kevin West, and I could go on and on. Jim Shooter even, and so many people that I ran into over the years gave me feedback. If I'm forgetting someone, I apologize. But I was on Comic Experience, if you're familiar with that,
Hmm.
and these
Hmm.
did that, and there's some amazing artists that gave me feedback. But and people, so are really supportive.
That's
So I think
cool.
it's amazing team sports and community, and anybody who's in comics always see that. People are always eager to help. I don't want to make anybody sad here, but if you're going to comics, don't do it for getting rich.
True
That's
enough.
not the way to go. It's something that, I call it my night job. It's something I do for my soul. It's a lot of fun.
Hmm.
And I think it's really, really a very unique medium, and it has, a very unique way of telling stories. And I think the big advantage for comics, is that you can do it by yourself. Like
Yeah.
much like writing a book or and I'm not against the AI tools. You just have to use them like references, in my view.
Mhm.
You have to know because if you don't, the comics don't tend to flow well. You can use Neil Adams, God rest his soul. I got to talk to him once. He always recommends using references of photos.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, artists are frustrated that AI swipes from them, and that I completely understand. But I use AI, for example, a little bit as references. I'll give you an example. Let's say I wanted to draw Paris um, underwater.
Mhm.
It's hard to find pictures of Paris underwater. So you ask AI, it gives you a few, you get an idea, and then you go from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as Walt Simonson said, don't swipe it cold, but it can be a good place to start. So
Mhm.
sometimes, it's from the imagination, sometimes you need a photo references, but the important thing is to focus on story. And that's the uniqueness of comics. You're not drawing just to make beautiful art. And I'm
Mhm.
quoting, paraphrasing Walter Simonson again, who's an amazing storyteller. One of my favorites, without a doubt. And everything should be the underlying question should be the story.
Mhm.
Now, I've had some interesting discussion on why superhero comic books became until recently the mainstream. I don't know if you know, the mainstream now, even in the States, is manga.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
the
It's
market
very popular.
it has taken over financially. I don't know I, I know people can check it online, but the whole comic book and manga industry is around 25 billion worldwide or something like that. In the
Mhm.
States, it's a few billion, but it's you know graphic novels and manga are leading the way with a billion or two, even more than superhero comics. But there's an interesting question: why did superhero comics become um, so successful versus others? Why did that become the mainstream? Why did that often become successful in movies? Now, this is my theory. I don't know how correct it is, but I think, first of all, I think comics have the advantage that they have everything.
Mhm.
You can do their science fiction, right? Superman can be science fiction. You can do their fantasy. Put Thor. You can put Superman in fantasy. You can have detective comics. DC is short for detective comics, right?
Mhm.
You can have romance in the superheroes. Any type of, even Teen Titans, they had everything. They had, if you look at it, they had a Robin or then Nightwing. You had a detective. You had a cyborg. You have people that have magical powers. You can do everything in them. Now, to work, comic books have to exaggerate.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if you're swiping a photo cold, as I said before, it's going to be very not flowing and not powerful. Jack Kirby, look at his exaggerations. They had purpose. By the way, he was amazingly leading you from panel to panel systematically, but he had power. You can't copy an image that it's stale and not moving, and there's no flow to it. So exaggeration when you hit, it can't be. It has to be in your face like this,
Mhm.
powerful.
Mhm.
Jumping out of the page. That's why Kirby, a lot of European artists that take a year off to draw would draw better than him, technically speaking, in the sense they would draw better than him, maybe proportions and anatomy and stuff like that. But nobody was in his league. Even till this day, I haven't seen you know, anyone that's quite as powerful as Kirby. John Buscema said that he swiped his design, and when he didn't, it didn't work. He created Ron Perez, who's an amazing artist, and Spider-Man is close. And there's a few, Sal Buscema. There's a few that are close, but I've never seen anyone with the power of Kirby ever. And that's saying a lot. So many artists came after him, to do that. So comic superheroes could really bring out the most in the medium of comics, right? And then when I was a kid, they could show Superman pulling six planets. I don't know if you remember the old Spider-Man TV series with the guy who used to be a kid in The Sound of Music.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
forget his name. He went to live in Australia after the love of his life, I think, if memory serves. But anyway, they had this. He was walking up, a building with this white wire, and stuff like. It wasn't what we could see and what we as kids could imagine Spider-Man doing. And then computer graphics came in, and they could do anything we can imagine and more.
Hmm.
Jim Starlin, who also has been in touch with, he said that when Star Wars came out, that was the moment that they passed comics in a sense. We could do seven starships and do things that they couldn't do in movies, and all of a sudden it went ballistic. And now anything you can imagine you can do. So naturally, superhero movies came out and were successful because they could take the medium to its utmost. But now, what I'm saying with comics, people can do personal story, life of pieces of life, or slice of life. They can do a lot of stuff with comics. And you see webtoons how it grew. The world is changing, and I think comics will always be there, but it'll be different.
Yeah. So that's the flexibility of the medium. I think you're absolutely right on that. And it is a medium. It's not just a genre. So lots of things can be done. Now you're working on Ancient Diary of Mars. So
Yeah,
please tell us a little bit about that as well
yeah,
as
sure.
where we might find it.
It's not a comic book or a graphic novel, as I wrote to you. It's an illustrated book,
Hmm.
but it has elements of comics, and it has some sequential art in it a little bit. But basically, the idea of the book is this: we're 500 years in the future. An Earth kid comes to Mars, and what he does is he writes a diary because he promised his grandfather he would, and he writes to his grandfather, and but he also draws. Basically, because I can write and draw, I said, okay, so it's different in the sense that I would say it's like Star Wars meeting the Diary of a Wimpy Kid a bit, and
Yeah.
kind of this kind of thing. But it's different in the sense that normally, again, how do I just did a book cover for a cover here in Israel. Um, how does it normally work? The writer writes a script of prose. He gives this to this artist, and the artist does associations, whatever works for him, or you know, and there are drawings throughout the book, but they're not integral to the story. Here,
Hmm.
the kid is writing and drawing what's happening to him. So so the you can't read this story just with the words, right?
Yeah.
So because he says something and says, and then this happened, and this I draw it. So every 2 pages, there's at least one drawing. What took me the most time, it took me 3 and something year and a half years or 3+ years to finish this book, was mostly the drawing. The story, I had it, down before and it's about 170 pages, and it was a lot of fun to do. But some drawings, I put too much time into them, but it was too much fun, so I couldn't stop myself. And it's great. And talking about support, you saw I sent you the page that's not finished of the cover of all the people that give recommendations. You
Hmm.
know, I said some of their names like Bob, and you have Tom DeFalco and Glenn Hurling, who used to be, and also and Tom was just to say to people that know, Tom DeFalco was, in addition to being a superb writer, he was editor in chief of Marvel. Glenn, who's also a superb writer, used to be an editor in Marvel, and you have artists Tom Greenberg who are at DC and others, and I'm still waiting for a few more to give. But this is again our industry when people are just so supportive. They read my book, and if they had some comments, they gave them as well, and it's really, really supportive.
Very cool. Yeah. And I found that on the this podcast too, that people are generally kind and just want to share about their work. And there are a lot of great stories out there too.
Why did you? What made you start this podcast? I saw a few interviews when you sent them to me. I was really enthusiastic. What
Mhm.
made you start this podcast?
I'm a literacy person. I love books, love storytelling, from comics to novels to film to whatever form. And I started interviewing creators in 2017, I think it was, through a blog. So this has sort of come out of that experience. I have friends that are into podcasting. One really good friend of mine, Adam, and I podcast sometimes too. So this has been sort of the next step in the journey.
Amazing.
It's
I think
fun. It's fun.
there's only one weakness to comic books. It's their name, comic books. You know why?
Mhm.
Do you know why they're called comic books, by the way?
I am assuming because they were sort of put in this place for children at a certain point, and
Well, actually, there used to be, if you remember the comic book strips.
uh-huh.
So comic books, the way we know them, like about 100 years ago, so a little bit less. There were comic strips, and but you had all kinds of strips. Not all of them were were funny.
Mhm.
But they put
Mhm.
them together, so they call them, so instead of comic strips, comic books. And the only thing I don't like about comics is the name, because I prefer graphic novel or sequential art because it puts such a limitation. Like, you know, if you initially I would say I'm an artist, I would not say I'm a comic books creator or an artist or writer, because an artist, I can draw portraits, and I used to sell those many years ago. So I can draw really realistic.
Mhm.
But it was like, until the Marvel movies came out, you couldn't say that you were a comic book creator. You were like frowned upon.
Yeah.
Stan Lee would go to me to, he said he would go to parties and he would say, "Oh, I'm a writer." And if it's a comic, they look at him like he's a leopard.
Well, certainly glad that the reputation of the form is expanding. And uh, if I'm a listener out there and I want to go see more about you and your work, where would be some places that I might go do that?
My Facebook,
Yep.
Moti Friedman, it's easy to find, and I post stuff there usually. Sometimes I post on Instagram and Twitter, but mostly, I'm an old guy, mostly Facebook. My kids always tell me, the five of them, yeah, yeah, you're on Facebook, you're old.
Well, I am on Facebook as well, so I will claim that status along with you. And Muddy, it's been a great chat with you, and I'll be glad to have you back anytime to talk about projects as they're coming along.
I would be truly honored. It was truly a pleasure, and thank you for letting me participate in this amazing thing. Keep it up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.